I didn't say a word when the HOA president started waving that violation notice in my face. Something about unauthorized solar installations. She was red from the neck up, voice sharp enough to slice drywall. I just let her rant until she ran out of breath, then quietly set a printed copy of the town's renewable energy integration ordinance on the table. My name was right there, in the drafting credits, underlined in blue from the county's legal department. I watched her eyes track the letters, then flick up to me. She didn't say another word after that. When I bought this house, I wasn't looking for trouble. I had spent 12 years in municipal planning and code enforcement, long enough to know that the quickest way to lose your peace was to get tangled in neighbor drama. I'd been through a rough divorce and wanted quiet. The house sat at the edge of a mid-sized HOA subdivision, backing up to an open field that rolled into the hills. It wasn't glamorous, but the sunlight hit the back deck perfectly every afternoon, and I could almost forget that I was technically still part of a community with rules about mailbox height and lawn edging. The house was old, but the roof was perfect for solar south-facing, unobstructed. I'd helped write the town's first renewable energy ordinance 5 years earlier, the one that laid out exactly how homeowners could install solar panels without special permits, as long as they met the setback and wiring standards. It was one of my proudest projects. I'd seen too many good environmental ideas get killed by petty regulations. So I wrote that code to protect people like me, practical, law-abiding citizens, trying to lower their energy bills and do something right. The first few months were peaceful. I planted herbs, repainted the porch, and started mapping out the small solar system I wanted to install. It wasn't anything huge, 8 panels, mounted flush with a roofline, using microinverters to feed directly into the grid. I filed my notice with the town inspector, who approved it within a week. The installation took 2 days. When the system came online and the meters started spinning backward, it felt like freedom. That's when the letters started. The first one came in a white envelope with the HOA's gold seal embossed on the corner. Notice of violation, unauthorized exterior modification. It said my solar panels were not approved by the Architectural Review Committee and demanded immediate removal or face a fine of $150 per day. I thought it was a mistake. The panels were in compliance with state law and town code. The HOA didn't have jurisdiction over renewable systems. Our ordinance had made sure of that. I figured I'd clear it up with a phone call. The call didn't go well. The president, a retired realtor named Cheryl, informed method aesthetics take precedence over experimental gadgets. When I tried to explain the legal distinction, she cut me off and said, "This community has standards. If you wanted to live in a trailer park, you should have bought one." I remember sitting there, phone pressed against my ear, feeling that old, familiar burn of bureaucratic arrogance. I'd written too many ordinances to be talked down to by someone who thought a law was just a suggestion. I sent her a polite email with a PDF of the ordinance attached. I even highlighted the clause that explicitly prohibited HOAs from restricting solar installations in compliance with local code. No response. Instead, the fines started stacking up. By the end of the month, they claimed I owed $4,200 and threatened to place a lien on my home. That's when I stopped arguing and started documenting. I printed every email, every notice, every voicemail. I took photos of the panels, time-stamped, and cross-referenced them with the installation permit. Then I went a step further. I requested the HOA's own charter and bylaws from the county clerk. They were public record, though most HOAs counted on residents not knowing that. Buried in their charter was a clause stating that any HOA rule in conflict with municipal law was automatically void. That was all I needed. I still tried to be civil. I attended their next board meeting, quiet and patient. Cheryl looked smug behind her little gavel. When I brought up the ordinance, she interrupted me to say the HOA doesn't answer to town politics. I could feel the smirk from 3 rows away. The neighbors shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I realized right then that this wasn't about rules, it was about control. So I stopped playing by their schedule. For the next few weeks, I compiled every relevant document or MITs, emails, charter sections, Eben to town as Renewable Energy Task Force minutes. I had enough to make a judge yawn halfway through the stack. Then I called in a favor. My former supervisor at the planning department still worked downtown, and when I explained the situation, he laughed out loud. "You mean the HOA that tried to sue the fire department over hydrant placement?" "Yeah, I remember them. Bring your paperwork." Together, we filed a formal complaint with the town's legal office for interference with municipal code enforcement. 2 days later, a letter went out to the HOA board from the city attorney's office, instructing them to cease and desist from any further action regarding my solar system. I didn't even have to deliver it myself. It was couriered by the town clerk. The fines stopped that day, but Cheryl wasn't done. A week later, I got a notice claiming the panels violated community aesthetics under a newly passed rule about reflective surfaces. The date on the rule: 2 days after the cease and desist. They had literally invented a new regulation to justify themselves. That's when I decided to stop being polite. I gathered every document again this time, including the HOS amendment notice, and scheduled a meeting at Town Hall. When the city attorney saw it, he whispered, "This is retaliation," Said flatly. "They just handed you a case." The next step was simple. I filed a civil complaint for harassment and unlawful interference with utility access. Within a week, the HOA received a summons to appear in small claims court. They folded faster than I expected. At the pre-trial hearing, their lawyer tried to argue that the HOA's right to maintain visual harmony outweighed my installation rights. The judge barely let him finish before asking, "Are you aware that this homeowner co-authored the ordinance you're citing?" The lawyer looked at me, then down at his notes, then quietly asked for a recess. When they came back, they offered a settlement. Full dismissal of fines, written apology, and a promise to remove all restrictive language from their bylaws. I accepted. I didn't need the money. I wanted the principle on record. The night after the judgment, Cheryl showed up at my gate. She didn't come inside. She just stood there, arms crossed, and said, "You really think you're better than everyone else?" Primera told her no. I just think rules should apply to everyone, even people who write them. She didn't reply. She turned and walked back to her car without another word. Over the next few months, the neighborhood got quieter. The constant patrols stopped. The petty notices vanished. A few neighbors even stopped by to ask how I'd done it, and I told them politely that the law protects you if you bother to read it. The HOA held new elections the following spring. Cheryl didn't run again. Now, when I sit on the porch in the evenings, I can hear the soft hum of the inverter as the panels feed power back into the grid. My electric bill averages $6 a month. Sometimes I still get letters from other HOAs around town, asking for input on how to update their bylaws to comply with the ordinance. I always smile when I sign those responses. Because the truth is, I didn't just win against an HOA. I proved that even the smallest bit of knowledge, quiet, methodical, written in plain legal ink, and dismantled the biggest bully in the cul-de-sac. Now they wave when they drive past my house, or they don't. Either way, it's quiet again.